Hi, my name is Joana Correia. I'm from Portugal, and I would like to make a small presentation about strategy and the business part of having a foundry producing fonts. Um, I'm from Porto, in Portugal, and I have my own small foundry. I run Nova Type Foundry as creating my own fonts and selling my own fonts since 2018. I've been a freelancer type designer since 2011. This is, well, my website, just you can take a look if you want to see more. And just a recent typeface, Loretta, that I designed recently. This is also another company where I collaborate with Schriftlabor, where I am the project manager and art director. I want to start by like many things that I wish I knew when I started out as a type designer. So I will share a few things I believe are important. A disclaimer here, I'm always thinking of talking about type design and fonts as a business. It can be a side project as well, but it's important to make it profitable, to continue playing the game of creating more fonts. When you create fonts, you might want to think about, do some soul searching before you start, or as you go when you start designing fonts. You need to answer some questions of who are you and what makes you unique. What's your story, because this will be super important to how you will communicate, and it's very important because it will also makes you different from the other foundries, the other designers, and that will be definitely a plus for your communication and your work and how you market yourself and your brand. For example, you can think about who are you designing for and who is your audience, because you can design very different things for very different people. You can choose to focus on script fonts that can be for advertising and packaging, or you can choose to focus on text fonts for editorial purpose, or you can choose to be yourself and just to explore different styles and be more eclectic, which is more or less what I do in this case. Also thinking about specific fonts and products that you're creating in the design process, which I'm not going to talk so much about, but always thinking about what is your font for, what does it offer that is different, what is the kind of problem that you're solving for your clients. Is it because you're creating a very technical font with many weights that gives them the options to choose between many styles, or are you giving them something to delight them in very display font, display design, that it's very communicative, it has a lot of emotion. So what are you going for when you're designing the fonts? This is important to think about in the design process of the fonts, but also for when you want to market the fonts, when you want to communicate your work. And this is like super important for the brand. What is the value that you want to create with your fonts? So when you're designing, you have to think about, what am I doing this? What is your mission in a sense? You want to create value for your customers with a lot of good features like open type features and variations, or you just want to delight them by producing a very focused design. So this is really important to have and to understand and to stick to that ideal and to that standard. Create like a design standard for yourself. So if you create this mission and this idea for you, what is your goal with your fonts and creating your work and your brand, this will make it more consistent when you're communicating, when you are interacting with your customers. Well, we're not changing the world, but we are creating a good type and contributing to a better and great communication between in our communities. Just a story, I recently saw one of my typefaces, lemongrass, being used in an outdoor in an hospital in the US. I saw this in the news video on YouTube, and it was super interesting. It said, like, let's do this together about vaccination and about COVID. And it felt like something important in a way that my font is inspiring other people to, pursue whatever it is. But in this case, it felt like really important and showing that fonts can really be influential in our daily lives. So creating this value and having these thoughts in your mind, in the background in your mind when you're creating your designs, it's great. So and you have a purpose when you're designing them. You understand what you are working for, and they can be very different purposes. So you have to choose and to take a look at what you value the most for yourself. So what kind of product we talked about? I would like to talk about the building of a brand. As you know, it can be time consuming and it's not overnight. So you have to be patient into doing this. One of the things I wish I knew was when I started was immediately starting to set a name for myself through a website, through social media, or really at the time it wasn't that strong as it is today, or also like creating your own name, like instead of using a different name, using just your name for the font company, for example. I think it can be really important, or choosing a name and then going with it. But it takes time. It takes consistent communication, showing your work and your process, and sharing and participating in all the communication out there for foundries and for fonts. So creating your voice and practicing through writing, for example, it can be really important. So if, for example, if you like to blog, then it can be a good way to put your brand out there. But I'll talk more about that in the tactics. What's important here as well, building your brand, is of course designing as many fonts as you can in the beginning at least, and definitely to create, to practice the design and to have a voice, to start having a different your own voice in design, seeing different possibilities. And again, when you're deciding what kind of product you want to focus on, maybe in the beginning you don't know, which is okay. So then if you test the different styles and you test yourself, then you can find, the people that are buying my fonts and they prefer this style I'm doing, maybe it's worth going there if you like it, of course. Or you can choose which styles you want to focus on, depending on how your skills are developing as well. So I think that takes time, and definitely it's important to take your time to do that. So then it comes to more of the marketing strategy itself. So all of this that we talked about already, it's part of that marketing strategy, because you need to know who you are and what you're serving, who are your customers, getting to know very well, trying to be there for them. But one of the most important things in marketing, it's positioning, which you can find more of in books and very great books that you can find about this. But the core of it is to position yourself in the mind of the customer. How you want to position yourself. Is it going to be because you're a very good type designer for script fonts, brush fonts, text fonts? So having a category usually helps to position people in people's mind, but that doesn't mean it needs to be. You can be recognized as a very creative type designer, font or brand that has a lot of new fonts. Of course, as I said, producing a lot of fonts in the beginning is good, so people get to notice your different projects and your different material. So positioning yourself and thinking about this is a really important subject, and something that you should do and take some time to study, to look at, because again, as I learned from my experience, it's really important to study, to read some books about marketing, strategy, positioning, and even other issues that will kind of, help you understand the business in itself and how you can communicate with people. For the generation of social media, I can say that probably it's easier to communicate and to be out there for your clients. It wasn't so much when I started, and I'm not such a social media person, but it's super important more than anything to be real, honest, and communicating. Again, where would you offer your fonts? So now we come to the also marketing strategy of how you're going to sell your fonts and where. It's very important to know the channels that you have available for doing that. There are many different ones, and there's also different strategies for this. So one of the strategies is to be in every retailer available to you, or choosing some of them, like having some of your fonts in one of them and then having other kinds of fonts that you design in another retailer, to make it more varied, and also understanding that each platform will have different customers and clients. This is very important, even though as type designers, we know that it's so hard to produce one font and it takes so long, then it's normal to see the same font in many different platforms, even if sometimes, it doesn't feel like they match so well, but it's a way of really getting the sales. So you might choose different platforms for your projects to sell them, but you may also choose to sell on your own website, where you can get the full royalties, which is great, but it's also a lot of work, a lot of investment to get people to your website. So it really, my advice would be to do your own website after you have some market experience and you have some following of your clients, and you already have some following that people will be happy to go to your own store and to buy directly. Of course, there are foundries that are doing this very well, like Art Typography, Grilly Type, Dynamo. Offler is also one that only sells directly on their website. So there's many people that you can take a look at and inspire yourself, or you can, most designers and most foundries actually sell on most platforms, but you can also see the difference in the communication in the foundries that still sell on their website, but they are present in most of the famous platforms that you know. So because there's a way, this is the best way to get more sales, of course, but it doesn't mean that the other option, selling only on your website, is not going to be profitable, which it is for these foundries that really stick with it and are consistent and have a very specific audience. So this is also a possibility. To grow your brand, I would say that the higher investment is the website. It's very important to have a website at some point. It doesn't have to have a shop, but you can have a shop later. But definitely it's great to have your own page so that people can communicate directly to you. But I wouldn't advise to do this right in the beginning, but wait for a while and wait for you to experiment, to find your voice, and then showing off better on your website. So the last thing, okay, so I've talked the place of many, sorry. So now we'll talk about the tactics of the marketing. Just not a lot because there's not so much time, but I will try to focus on the important parts. So when you know who you are and where you want to be, you need to implement this strategy. As you know, of course, social media will be very important to show your work and to build your brand. I would say experiment as much as you can with different platforms and different mediums, because, for example, you can choose what you do best and what you prefer. If you like to do videos, you can do videos. If you like to write and blog or tweeting, it can be a very powerful tool as well. So you can create many different kinds of content, not just showing the work, but showing the process, talking about yourself or talking about the brand. So there are many ways of creating content marketing for social media and blogging as well. So this is definitely, there are many books that talk about this part, and I recommend This is Marketing by Seth Godin, because again, what it talks about is that you don't need to please everyone, so you can focus on just a small part of the market. Like you can say, okay, I only need 1,000 true fans that like my work, so I can be myself, so I don't have to please everyone. And this is super important because, again, like I said, you need to find what makes you unique, what's you, honest, true, and open, because this will create a better connection and empathy with your customers. If you don't like to show yourself so much, so you can focus on the brand specifically and the brand values and keep those always in your communication. That, as we talked about, it should be consistent, it should be real, and again, be consistent, because you will need time to see the results of this. It can take a year, it can take 2 years to get more clients and to get more visibility, but definitely it's worth the time if you persist. Again, type design is a very different thing. It's a very complicated and long task, so focus on making a good product. So that will be always good marketing. Again, all the business part is super important to know and to manage well, but of course the design will always be a very good and very important part of the business, because if you create a bad product, it doesn't matter if you create very good communications if the projects are not so good. I would say then implement, review, and try to go to it again. Try to review and correct all the tactics and how you're communicating. But one of the most important things will be to be consistent with your mission. Again, your values, your mission, what you're looking to do, and keeping that in the back of your mind when you're designing, creating a new product. And I didn't even talk about pricing, and that's a whole different thing that you should definitely do some searching about, because pricing will also be a marketing strategy, because you can work in many different ways. You can have high price and focus on a specific clients, or you can have, mid price where you are more or less even with the market, or you can even go lower if you really want to sell a lot quantity. So there's still a lot of things that I couldn't in this short talk to talk about, but there are many books that can help you find this, some interesting community discussions on these subjects as well. So I would like to finish off just by talking about some digital trends. That everything is a subscription now, everything is platform based, and social videos are getting more and more important in terms of the content that we talked about and how people interact. Artificial intelligence will also be super important, especially used in the platforms that are selling the fonts. So like finding the typefaces and matching them with the different fonts. So this is going to be super big. So the all subscription idea, it's super important, because as you know, with typefaces and fonts, this is already happening with like Adobe subscription, where you can have access to all the fonts. There's like Font of the Month Club, where you have a subscription, you pay and you get some fonts each month. You get one new font and you can have access to other fonts. So this is like super important, and you can also explore the digital trends of e-commerce, because in a way, type design, fonts are definitely an asset for e-commerce. So you can focus on how e-commerce trends are going, and you can try to adapt them to the reality of font design. The platform base, we all know that. So all the big retailers are actually platforms, and these platforms have many functionalities and many users, and we need to be in them if we want to connect and to be there present for the clients. Or we can create our own platforms, which would be interesting, and some people are doing that, like Future Fonts. It's also a platform which is amazing for young type designers and even more established ones to communicate with the user. No? So I want to thank you. I'll finish now.